Hi, AP Environmental Science. It is me, Mrs. Willis, and I am going to talk to you today about the water treatment process. So what exactly happens when we create this sewage? What do we do with it, and where does it go? So let's go ahead and get started. Well, it probably is no surprise that California has some polluted beaches, and specifically in LA County, we do have high levels of water pollutants in our oceans. So let's take a look at where some of this is coming from. There are two main sources of coastal contamination here in our area. Number one, sometimes we do have raw sewage spills. So our sewer lines beneath the ground, they crack, and then that sewage does leak out into the rivers and then ultimately the oceans. And then secondly, we do have urban runoff. So anything that is on the street will eventually make its way out to our nearest river, which is the LA River, and then out to the Pacific Ocean. Where is the sewage coming from? Well, anywhere in your house that has a water connection or a water line will usually generate sewage. So your toilets, your kitchens, and your showers, they are all connected to a sewer line underneath your house, and that usually feeds to a main sewer line that goes to a city's treatment plant to get cleaned. And this also includes businesses. So any sort of sewage that's coming from businesses, whether it be bathrooms, washing machines, sinks, they're also connected to the city sewer line, and then that goes out to a wastewater treatment facility to be cleaned. Here in the southern Los Angeles area, a lot of our raw sewage does flow to this facility here. It's called Hyperion. It is a wastewater treatment facility, and it uses primary and secondary treatment to clean sewage that is being generated from the city. All treatment facilities were required to be used thanks to the Clean Water Act of 1972. So when this law was passed, all water being generated from the city had to pass primary and secondary treatment before it was released out to the oceans or a river. The first step of wastewater treatment is primary treatment. And primary treatment involves the physical removal of objects that are coming from the sewer lines. So some of the tools that are used are settling tanks. So they allow that sewage water to sit, and then anything that's heavy goes down to the bottom and is scraped out of the settling tank. Anything that's buoyant will float to the top and then is removed. And those things that are removed will usually end up in a landfill. Another tool that's used is kind of like the bar screen or the raked bar screen. These are screens that are physically removing objects that are in the water. Here in this picture, you can see a primary treatment settling tank. So you have sewage water in that little circle there. It's being allowed to sit and have gravity assist with the removal of some of these objects. On the top, you do have a screen that is scraping the top of anything that may be buoyant. And underneath this tank, which you can't really see, there's also another screen that's removing things that have settled to the bottom. Again, these items are usually placed in a landfill. The water that's left over after primary treatment goes into secondary treatment, and secondary treatment is a biological process. You take that water and you add aerobic bacteria to that water. You let it sit there and give it oxygen, and what happens is that any kind of human and food waste that's in there, any soaps, detergents, the bacteria just love it. They eat it up and they break it down. So they help us clean the water. So some of the tools used here are aeration tanks. And again, they'll use the clarifiers and the settling tanks to remove anything that may have settled. Anything that has settled out of the secondary tank goes into what's called a digester. That material that has settled, we term it sludge. And sludge is actually a material that anaerobic bacteria do like to consume. So we put anaerobic bacteria in with the sludge. That means they're not getting exposed to oxygen, and they will make this very nutrient-rich fertilizer we call biosolids. Also, in the process, these anaerobic bacteria generate methane. And so we can vacuum that out of the digesters, set it on fire, and then we can generate electricity from this natural gas. As a specific example, here is a picture of these biosolids that are created from the digesters. Here in LA, they are sent to Kern County and they're used to grow wheat or barley. So they are considered Class A biosolids and they are safe enough to be used for animal feed. Before we can release the water out into the ocean, the water needs to be disinfected. At Hyperion, they use chlorine to kill off any bacteria that may be living in the water. Other facilities will use ozone or UV light to kill off bacteria before they release it into a river or an ocean. When a raw sewage line breaks, whether it be from a home or a business, that raw sewage runs onto the street or into the ground, and it will eventually end up in some place called a storm drain. Do not get storm drains confused with sewer lines. Storm drains are these, you want to think about it, kind of holes that are in the ground, and they're used to remove flood water from the city relatively quickly. So materials go into these storm drains and they go directly to our nearest river, which is the LA River. The storm drain water is not treated. It does not go to a wastewater facility plant. So anything that ends up in the storm drain will eventually end out in the river and then out to the ocean. So this is how we do get beaches being closed here in LA, is because that raw sewage contains a lot of pathogens, a lot of different types of bacteria and viruses in it. So they have to close down the beaches to make sure that people aren't swimming in those pathogens. Here is a picture of those storm drains I was just talking about. So we did create those here in Los Angeles to provide a quick exit for stormwater. So we get these freak rainstorms and we need to remove the water very quickly from the city to reduce flooding. So this water goes directly out to the LA River and out to the Pacific Ocean. So the water is not treated. Anything that's on the streets will end up in a storm drain and it goes out into the river. So this is why it's super important that we take care of the things that are on the street. If you see stuff on the street, pick it up, put it in a trash can, and remove it from the ground. Also, you might have seen these on our storm drains. We began putting filters on all of the storm drains here in LA, or little screens, and it does slow the input of urban runoff, but they aren't so successful because remember, the whole purpose of a storm drain is to remove the flooded water quickly. Well, when you put a filter or a screen on it, that actually slows down the flow of water, and so you do get increased flooding. A lot of trash can be found in urban runoff, a lot of litter, right? And so that litter does start decomposing, starts breaking down. And as that occurs, you do get an increase in the bacteria that are living in the area. So you definitely do get an increase of bacterial counts in the water coming from urban runoff. You also might find higher levels of rodents that carry disease because of the increased amounts of litter, which may include food waste and dead organic material that some creatures love to live off of. Unfortunately, animal and human feces can also be found in urban runoff. People don't pick up after their pets, and here in LA, we do have a homeless issue, so sometimes you can find this fecal material in the urban runoff. So why is that a problem? Well, fecal material does contain high levels of bacteria. For example, E. coli and salmonella can be found. Total coliform is another one. and all of these can really make people sick. So it's important that we keep things off of the ground and out of the water. All right, everyone. Well, that concludes our talk on water treatment, and I will see you soon.